Hello, and welcome back to the Press Box here at Duquesne Student Television. Joined as always by Brentaro and Luke, I am Luke Henney. We're glad to have you back, and it's hard to believe it's that time of year already, but it is close to mid-February, and that means title time. That's right, today we are talking all things Super Bowl 56. We've got the Cinderella story in the Cincinnati Bengals on one hand. On the other hand, we've got the Los Angeles Rams, who will become the second team in as many years to play the big game in their home stadium. So as you can see, we've certainly got plenty of storylines to dig into. Let's waste no more time. Brentaro, why don't you give us an outlook into the Cincinnati Bengals season to this point so far?
Absolutely, I will do that. So last season, Cincinnati Bengals star quarterback Joe Barrow was the #1 overall pick in the 2020 NFL draft from LSU. And his rookie season last year ended in Week 11 against the Washington Commanders, which at the time they were known as the Washington Football Team. In the game, he tore his ACL and MCL in his left knee while throwing a pass. There was no doubt that he was going to work hard in the offseason to recover from his knee injury and get better. But I don't think many people thought that after going 4-11-1 the year before, that they would win the AFC North with a 10-7 regular season record. And it was kind of impressive that, to me, just the idea that they were able to win the division after being at the bottom last year. And it's known AFC North, you could arguably say, is the hardest division in football. But in the fact that they're going to make it into the Super Bowl the following year with a current record of 13-7, it's just simply wonderful for all people living in Cincinnati. You look at 5 of the team's 7 losses in the regular season were by 5 points or fewer, while 4 out of the 7 losses were decided by a field goal. Like, I have it right here. They lost to the Bears by a field goal. They lost to the Packers by a field goal, the Jets by a field goal, and the 49ers by a field goal. I think, two of those losses were in overtime too, though. So you just think that they were the number 4 seed. Yeah, correct. And just the idea that if they just could have won maybe 4 of those games, they could have even had a better seed. They could have hosted a championship game, maybe hosted a divisional game too, maybe provide some more revenue for the city of Cincinnati, though. I mean, that's something that they have to look past on. But just the idea that they've just been having all this success and media attention throughout this past year is simply just good for the city of Cincinnati. And besides Joe Barrow, the additions that the Bengals made of drafting Jamar Chase, who was also Burrow's college teammate at LSU, and signing defensive players Trey Hendrickson, Eli Apple, and Mike Hillen, they've definitely been making an impact too, especially with Hendrickson, who led the team this season with 14 sacks in the regular season. Statistically, Burrow had a good regular season, throwing for 4,611 yards and 34 touchdowns, while running back Joe Mixon rushed for 1,205 yards, and linebacker Logan Wilson led the Bengals in tackles with 100 and interceptions with 4. In the team's first 3 playoff games, they've won by 7 points or fewer. To me, it doesn't matter how a team wins as long as they do win, which is what the Bengals have proved in the previous 3 games. I don't know specifically when the last time they won a playoff game was. I know it's been a long time.
Before this year, it was 1990.
Before 1990. So they haven't won a playoff game since then. And now this postseason, they've won 3 straight. Like, that's insane for people who live in Cincinnati. But can you argue that the Bengals could have or should have lost to the Raiders in the wild card game, the Titans in the divisional round, and perhaps the Chiefs in the championship round? Yes, but that's far in the past now. And just the idea that they're here, it's a blessing for all the Cincinnati Bengals players that they're going to play on the biggest stage, and for Bengals fans to watch their team play at the biggest stage as well. Something else that I thought was interesting when I was looking at how the Bengals have progressed throughout the season is that, including the regular season and postseason, the Bengals have won no more than 3 games in a row. The team is currently on a 3-game winning streak that I mentioned earlier, and in order to raise the Lombardi Trophy, they have to extend its winning streak to 4, which would be the team's highest this season. So, literally, for Cincinnati, just so many positive things, and no matter if they win or lose, as we'll talk more about that later on in this episode, just the future for Cincinnati is just trending upwards to me. So, Luke, you might as well tell me what you think about their opponent for this upcoming matchup in the Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Rams are a polar opposite of what the Bengals were coming into this year. They've made the playoffs for their last 5 seasons now, but they were a team that came into this year with sky-high expectations, and that's before they went out and acquired star quarterback Matt Stafford from the Detroit Lions. Adding a guy like him only heightened those expectations. And up until July, it looked like it was going to be smooth sailing. But unfortunately, in July, once training camp got underway, running back Cam Akers, who tore his Achilles in July, as I mentioned, after a breakout rookie campaign in 2020, this left the team with a rushing tandem of Darrell Henderson Jr., who's since been injured himself, and Sony Michel, who was acquired from the New England Patriots in August. Kind of a lesser-known tandem, but they got the job done while Akers was out. And as I mentioned, they had those sky-high expectations. The Rams did come storming out of the gate with a 7-1 record. And in those 7 wins, they had an average margin of victory of 13.4 points. So none of those wins were all that particularly close. They were blowing teams out of the building through that first 8-game stretch. However, when the calendar did flip into November, things got a little shaky. The Rams went winless throughout the month. They lost 3 straight games with a bye week in there as well. So after they beat the Texans on October 30th, they didn't see the win column again until December 5th when they blew out the Jacksonville Jaguars 37-7. So after that win versus Jacksonville, they're sitting at 8-4. They head to Arizona for a pivotal Monday night matchup against the Cardinals, which at the time many people thought might decide the NFC West title. The Rams avenged their Week 4 loss to the Cardinals, which was a home loss, with a 30-23 road victory in Phoenix. That win would end up being the second in what was a 5-game winning streak. That 5-game winning streak was snapped in Week 17 when the Rams blew a 17-0 lead at home against the rival San Francisco 49ers in that final matchup of the regular season. However, with a record of 12-5, the Rams were able to still secure the NFC West regular season title, finishing as the 4 seed in the conference. Before we talk about how they got through the playoffs, I think it's important to talk about how successful their regular season was when it comes to statistics. We talked about Stafford. He threw for nearly 4,900 yards and 41 touchdowns. And it seems like every time he was thrown to Cooper Kupp. Kupp ended up winning the NFL's receivers triple crown, leading the league with 145 receptions, 1,947 receiving yards, and 16 receiving touchdowns. On the ground game that we previously talked about, the tandem of Henderson and Michel, they combined to rush for a solid 1,500 yards. And on the defensive side of the ball, per usual, as we will mention later, Aaron Donald led the way. Only 12.5 sacks this year, which is less than he expects, but it's still very respectable. We also saw star cornerback Jalen Ramsey have a team-high tying 4 interceptions. And I think one of the biggest keys throughout the regular season for the Rams was the the acquisitions that they made to add to an already deep roster. They go out and pick up wide receiver Odell Beckham after he gets cut from the Cleveland Browns. He's been a difference maker to this point. They also go out and grab Von Miller, a linebacker, Super Bowl champion, in a trade with the Denver Broncos. And then come playoff time, they got Cam Akers back to add to that deep running back core. So come postseason time, the Rams got another crack at the Arizona Cardinals, and they took care of business. It was never really a game. They won the contest 34-11, and that set them up for a divisional round matchup with Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And to many people's surprise, the Rams dominated the first 2.5 quarters of that game. They were leading 27-3, but as everybody knows, when Tom Brady's in a game, that game's never truly over. So Brady led a comeback. He got the game tied with just under a minute left at 27-27. But unfortunately for Tampa Bay, they couldn't stop that connection of Stafford and Kupp. The two combined for 2 pass connections of a total of 64 yards on the final drive just prior to setting up kicker Matt Gay for a game-winning field goal as time expired. That puts the Rams in the conference championship. Who better to face in the conference championship than the rival 49ers, looking to avenge 2 regular season losses to San Francisco. And for the first 2.5 quarters of that game, it looked like it was going to be more of the same. The Rams were trailing San Francisco 17-7, but Stafford and Kupp led a comeback. They took the lead 20-17 and were able to hold off any sort of comeback from San Francisco. They win the game 20-17, grab their second Super Bowl bid in the last 4 seasons. So overall, a very successful regular season and obviously postseason to this point. When it comes to keys to victories, how do you think the Bengals complete that Cinderella run and hoist their first ever Lombardi Trophy?
Well, I think one of their first keys to victory for me, they just got to use their three big-time receivers, I should say. What I've noticed about Joe Burrow is that he has made a name for himself by throwing the football. And you might think to yourself, Luke, like, well, quarterbacks are supposed to be known for just passing the ball, right? Well, yeah, but however, that's not always the case. When I think about NFL quarterbacks such as Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Cam Newton, or even Russell Wilson, I think of them being well known based on their ability to run the ball, to be honest with you. When Barrow won the College Football Playoff National Championship and Heisman Award in 2020 while at LSU, he had four receivers that had the ability to make plays, and his current NFL teammates, Jamar Chase and Thaddeus Moss, who hasn't had a whole lot of playing time in Cincinnati. I think he's still in the practice squad right now. And then he also had Vikings receiver Justin Jefferson and Panthers receiver Terrace Marshall. And the fact that Barrow is a Bengal and can still throw the ball to his two former college teammates and Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins makes it a reason why the Bengals should attack by throwing the football. Also, with the idea that Burrow completed over 70% of his passes in the regular season and has completed 68.8% of his passes in the first three postseason games, if you're a Bengals coach, you know he hasn't been having difficulties throwing the football, so you should just keep the same strategy the same until it fails, because it's been successful up to this point. In the regular season, Higgins and Chase both recorded over 1,000 receiving yards, while Boyd had 828 receiving yards. So I just wanted to include those stats to show how dominant they can be passing the football. I mean, you watch as much football as I do as well, though. I mean, we don't really see Joe Burrow like run the football as much. I mean, he can though, but like he doesn't need to, like Lamar and Kyler. I mean, he might not have the speed, but with these three receivers, he doesn't really need to like try to be like them. If you know where I'm getting at.
Right, and if he can get C.J. Uzomah back, the tight end, from injury, that would add a fourth weapon.
Absolutely. I agree with that as well. Another key for the Bengals in order to win this game is they got to stop Aaron Donald and Cooper Kupp. Like you said before, Aaron Donald had 12 and a half sacks in the regular season. And I think about also some of the NFL's best defensive players as well, and T.J. Watt and Myles Garrett. They come to mind. And the Bengals were 3-1 during the regular season when they had to face Watt and Garrett. And in the team's final game, I don't know why I said home game, they'll have to try and stop three-time NFL Defensive Player of the Year, Aaron Donald. He hasn't had the big numbers, as you mentioned before, but I think it's because the idea he's been double-teamed more than usual, even sometimes triple-teamed, and that makes sense, but his impact is still felt by opposing offensive linemen putting in that work to try and stop him. Because Aaron Donald is shorter than average D lineman and almost every O lineman, he has the leverage advantage on almost every snap where he can get under the blocker's pads and execute. Anyone that looks at him can see how muscular and strong he is, and while his combination of speed, finesse, and power moves helps him easily evade blockers, go from one gap to another in the blink of an eye, and wiggle past opposing blockers with ease. So just the idea that they've been able to stop defensive players, as I said, Watt, Garrett. They stopped a pretty well decent Kansas City defense last in the AFC Championship round. So if you want to hoist that Lombardi Trophy, it makes sense why you got to beat the best. And Aaron Donald is still one of the best defensive linemen. So if you want to win, you got to find a way that he doesn't attack you and destroy you. And another player that the Bengals really need to focus on is wide receiver Cooper Kupp. He led the NFL, as you said, in the regular season with receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. And without him, there might not be a receiving game for the Rams, as he's arguably the team's most valuable player in my eyes. I don't feel that the Rams have a good running game as without Darrell Henderson. I don't know. You probably think they're fine with Cam Akers, though, but I don't know. I just feel like Henderson would have been a better fit, though, but the Rams got to do with the circumstances that they are faced with, though. So maybe Akers could get the job done, though. But if I'm a Bengals player, I feel a little bit more comfortable knowing that they would face Akers rather than Henderson, because Henderson had a good regular season, too. And I just don't feel, as I said, the Rams have a good game without Henderson. I'm not impressed with the other running backs that they have on their depth chart, and I'm not impressed with them at all. That's why I can't even remember the names off the top of my head. And if they can stop Kupp, this game will be a lot more interesting, because as you said, Cooper Kupp is a dominant football player. And if he can have one of those types of games that he had in the regular season, which he can post like 10-plus receptions for over 200 yards, it's not going to be a good day for anyone who likes the Cincinnati Bengals. And another key to victory for the Bengals is you just got to want it more. And by that, it's just, to me, it's just how much heart you have. Bengals fans, players, and staff have been waiting for this moment for a long time. As you said, Luke, they haven't won a playoff game since 1990. And who knows when the next time they will make the Super Bowl, maybe even make the playoffs. So they simply got to have that willpower to want to win this game. I feel that a good pregame speech from Zach Taylor is going to be crucial. And thinking in Joe Burrow's point of view, you think of other quarterbacks like Ben Roethlisberger, who recently retired, and Russell Wilson and Patrick Mahomes. They all won Super Bowls in their second years as starting quarterbacks. And yeah, Mahomes, even though he won it in his third league, he won it in his second year starting back in 2019. For some of our audience that didn't know that. So if I was Burrow, I would want to be on that list too, just like the rest of those greats, which arguably all three of them, as I said, Roethlisberger, Mahomes, and Wilson, they could potentially make the Hall of Fame someday. The fact that most of the fans at SoFi Stadium in that game is, I assume, going to be Rams fans, that should make Burrow and the Bengals feel like underdogs, making them want to win this game even more and having kind of like a chip on your shoulder. For years, people have made fun of the Bengals and its fans, and winning the Super Bowl, I feel like, would literally stop the disrespect they would receive. It wouldn't surprise me if the media and everybody are rooting for the Rams, because the idea that Stafford being traded to the Rams would have the perfect ending in a Super Bowl title, which would be just a good story that the media could cover. And if I'm a Bengals player, I would be thinking about the scenario and making sure it doesn't happen. And just something else I thought about too, this is the first season since 2010 that A.J. Green is not on the Bengals roster, as he spent this past season with the Arizona Cardinals. And from what I just read over the past years, I wouldn't say he had problems with Cincinnati, like relationship-wise though, but just the idea that they weren't winning games, that definitely had to tick him off a little bit though. So it wouldn't surprise people if he thought that if AJ thought Cincinnati was a team that was never going to improve, but obviously they're improving now. And the Bengals winning could also be like a sign to Green that he should have never left though. So just the idea for the Bengals that it's just a once-in-a-lifetime this is kind of like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You just got to take full advantage of it. Life's so short, and you just think about everything that people had to deal with throughout COVID, throughout the past year and a half to 2 years, though. I mean, life, you just got to appreciate life and appreciate everything that comes at you. And for the Cincinnati Bengals, just the idea that they're playing in a Super Bowl, as I said, you just got to take full advantage of it, and you just got to want to win this game. So, Luke, just tell me, what do you think are the Rams' keys to victories in order for them to raise a Lombardi trophy in their home stadium?
Well, a lot of them are keys that you touched on, but obviously I'm going to provide the counter to that. My most important one is protecting home field. I think that the Rams really do have a unique opportunity. I mentioned in the open that they are the second team in as many years to host the Super Bowl in their own stadium. For 54 years prior, that never happened, and now it's happened twice in 2 years. Tell me how that happens. I guess COVID really does change everything. But this is the first time around where a Super Bowl will be hosted by a home team with a full capacity crowd. Last year, Tampa Bay had their home crowd, but it was at a reduced capacity. As I mentioned, that is a very unique opportunity. The Rams are a team that lost 3 home games during the regular season. And they were within minutes of falling to the 49ers in the NFC Championship game. It took that valiant comeback to make sure that a third didn't turn into a fourth. They're not going to have a true home field advantage just because it's been known for years that the Super Bowl was going to be held here. People from all over, both domestically and internationally, buy their tickets well in advance. So they won't have that true home field advantage, but they certainly have a distinct advantage over the Bengals, who have to travel across the country, get accommodated in a new city throughout the course of this week. The Rams don't necessarily have to do that. So I would think and hope that if they want to win, this is an advantage that they'll use wisely. In terms of on the field, you got to use Stafford to Kupp all day. That's the connection that got you here. There's no doubt about that. They are not in this position without that lethal connection between Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp. In the postseason alone, I know we talked about their regular season chemistry already. In just 3 postseason games, Kupp's caught 25 of Stafford's pass attempts for 386 yards and 4 touchdowns. 25 catches in 3 games is very respectable. So there's no sense in fixing something that, in my opinion, it's not broken. I think this is one of the most stable connections that the league has seen in a long time. So why not use it all game long? If it got you to this point, if it got you through 17 regular season games and 3 postseason games, so 20 games total, you might as well keep using it. But with that being said, I think that it might be important to get other receivers involved. The Rams don't necessarily have the luxury that the Bengals do in having 3 dynamic receivers like Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, and T. Higgins. They do have a respectable receiving game, though, and if in the event that Kupp is neutralized, they're going to have to depend on that receiving game. Throughout the postseason, the Bengals have allowed just 88 rushing yards per game compared to almost 250 passing yards. And the Rams are averaging over 300 passing yards per game and just under 100 rushing yards per game. So clearly what that tells you is the Rams are a pass-heavy offense, and the Bengals have a little bit more trouble stopping the pass than they do the run. So if Kupp is neutralized, you go to those secondary receivers. You try to use deep threats like Odell Beckham and Van Jefferson, maybe Tyler Higbee, the tight end, if he's able to get healthy, or Kendall Blanton, his backup, in the event that Higbee's not healthy. Kupp's going to likely get that first-team coverage from Mike Hilton, but as he's proven all year, he's hard to cover even against first-team coverages. But anything can happen. There's a reason the Bengals got to the Super Bowl. They are a really good team. So in the event that they are able to find a way to shut Kupp down, you got to go to Beckham, you got to go to Jefferson, you got to go to those tight ends. Because if Kupp shut down and you've proven that the passing game is the way to go, you got to find a way to make it work. You can sprinkle in the Sony Michel, sprinkle in the Cam Akers every now and then, but passing ultimately is the key to victory for the Rams. All right, so before we head off, we don't think it would be right if we didn't give all of our thoughts on who we think will take home the Lombardi Trophy on Sunday evening and why. Brentaro, who do you have taking it home?
Well, before I answer your question, Luke, I just want to say that this entire NFL season has been filled with upsets and full of entertainment and just something else to think about. Pittsburgh natives Tyler Boyd and Aaron Donald, both graduating from high schools around 20 minutes away from the Pittsburgh City. Just the idea that one of them is finally going to be able to hoist their first Lombardi Trophy is just going to be special because they've just worked so hard throughout their high school careers and college careers. As you know, when they both played at the University of Pitt, they had just tremendous impacts on that whole program. And just the idea that just one of them is just going to be a Super Bowl winner, that's just going to be awesome to see, just being from here. And while I do believe on paper that the Rams are a better team, it would make the most sense if I thought that the Rams would win. However, with everything that's happened throughout this entire NFL season, for example, you can just go like to the Jets beating the Tennessee Titans in a Week 4 matchup, and then it was either week 11, I think, week 10, week 11, something like that. But when the Jaguars beat the Bills like 9-6, like who would have thought that? And so
Right.
just the idea that just so many things just happening that nobody would have really thought, like Antonio Brown too. Now I'm just going off on a tangent here, but him just taking his jersey off in the middle of the game and just walking across the field, exiting, like. When would we ever see something like that from like an NFL player? So anything can possibly happen, as we have seen throughout the regular season. I think anything can also happen in the Super Bowl. However, with everything that's happened, I feel that the Bengals will finally win this game 26-21. Many people are not surprised that the Rams are in the Super Bowl compared to the Bengals because the Rams made the trade in the offseason to get Stafford to play in a moment like this. And I think Stafford is ready to play on the biggest stage at his home stadium. But I feel like outside or maybe so-called spiritual forces will stop him and the Rams making the Bengals Super Bowl champions. I also think those spiritual forces that I brought up will also make sure that a team hosting the Super Bowl will not win for 2 consecutive years. And I wouldn't be surprised if I keep bringing up the term spiritual forces. As you can look at the Bengals schedule, their past 2 postseason games, they've won those games by 2 game-winning field goals, and you might think to yourself, Luke, like, okay, well, they've won their games by game-winning field goals as well in in the Titans game when time expired and against the Chiefs in overtime. They're definitely not going to kick another game-winning field goal right in the Super Bowl, right? Well, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't, though. But don't be surprised if it does. That's all I'm saying. So with that in mind, Luke, just tell me who you think wins the Super Bowl.
First off, I like the point that you raise. I think this postseason alone has showed us that anything can happen, and I don't think anyone in their right mind would be surprised if it came down to a game-winning field goal. Again, that's just the way these postseason weeks have gone. You mentioned a crazy regular season, something we've never really seen before. I think it's ironic that the NFL coming into the season, coming out of the COVID year, they branded this as their biggest season ever, and it's surely, for better or for worse, been their biggest season ever. Personally, when it comes to this game, though, I like the Rams. I think 31-21. I don't think necessarily that the moment's going to be big for Joe Burrow, too big for Joe Burrow and company, but I personally just feel like this is the Rams' time to finally bring it home after multiple years of coming up short. We saw them last year lose to the Packers in the divisional round. 2019, they missed the playoffs. 2018, they made it to the Super Bowl, but Jared Goff and his offense just couldn't get going against New England. All they put up was a field goal. The year before that, they lose in the wild card round to Atlanta. I feel like years of frustration are finally about to boil. Maybe all it took was replacing a Jared Goff with a Matt Stafford. It's no disrespect to Jared Goff, but sometimes the pieces just click a little better, and it certainly feels like that's what's happening in Los Angeles right now. I don't think it's going out on a limb here, but given what I've seen this whole season, I'd expect Matt Stafford to throw for at least 275 yards and connect with Cooper Kupp for at least one touchdown. Now, again, if I went to FanDuel or DraftKings, those would both probably be minus bets, meaning they expect that to happen. I think everyone expects that to happen, but why not? They've proven all year that that's what they're going to do. And just finally, we've talked about it a ton, but what better place to win a Super Bowl title than in your own beautiful SoFi Stadium, packed with droves of fans. We mentioned that Raymond James Stadium didn't have that same effect last year during the COVID season, but this is certainly a special opportunity for the Rams, and I don't think that they are going to fail that opportunity. I think they're going to cash in big time. Unfortunately, that is all the time we've got today, so we hope that you enjoy your Super Bowl Sunday with your family, your friends, and your loved ones. We'll see you next time. Thank you for watching.